Welcome, everyone, and thanks for bearing with us for the last few minutes as we're working out some technical difficulties. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm just utterly delighted to have John Guyton as our presenter this evening, and I say this evening, of course, because for some of you it might be late afternoon, and when we find out where everyone's from, it might even be very, very late night for some of you, but regardless of your time zone and where you're from, thank you so much for joining us. And you are in for a real treat. I've known John for many, many years, and there is almost no one in all the years that I've worked at Green Teacher who has more expertise and has spent more time thinking about how to engage young people with insects and how to sustain their interest in science and in the environment. So I'm utterly delighted, John, that you accepted the invitation. Before I introduce you, let me just give everybody an idea of where we're going this afternoon or this evening. John's going to speak for about 30 minutes, and then it'll be wide open for your questions. But we also have, as many of you have discovered, in the bottom left-hand corner, a chat box, and I'd encourage you to use it to ask questions. Let me know if technical difficulties. Respond to each other's comments if you find those of interest. And for those of you who are new and are not familiar with the chat box, but can see others have been using it here, it's in the bottom left-hand corner, and where it says main room, to the right of that is an empty horizontal box. And if you type in a question and hit enter, or the double vertical lines to the right of that blank horizontal box, that will propel your comment up into the chat box for all to see. You can also select the name of an individual. If you, instead of main room, you could send a message to me directly, Tim Grant, the host, or to anyone else, and so that only they will see it. But in any case, the chat box, and you don't have to wait till the end of John's presentation to ask a question. John probably won't see it until the end of his presentation, but I will, and can make sure that it gets asked at the appropriate time. Now, if you are new, we are this is if you're not familiar with Green Teacher, and John, if you can move us to the next slide. Green Teacher is about a little over a 20-year a magazine that we've been publishing for over 20 years. Over 1,000 people around the world have contributed their innovative ideas on how to educate kids about the environment and across many, many topics. And in the last 10 years, we had the pleasure of publishing a number of books. And more recently, and John, if you could just advance that slide again. And more recently, thanks, John. And now, more recently, we, of course, launched a series of webinars, and I see many familiar faces who've signed up again tonight, and they've been a really enjoyable, different way that we have found to share, do the same thing we do in the pages of the magazine, but in a little more obviously interactive and more immediate way with these webinars. I should also mention that this presentation is being archived, as you heard at the outset. You can tell your friends afterwards that they can view it for up to a month. After that, it disappears into a subscriber-only database, along with where you can find all the other 30 or 30-plus webinars that we've done now over the last 2 years. And if you're not already a subscriber or you haven't purchased any of our books, I'd certainly encourage you to do either after this session, so that we can keep doing these free webinars in the months and years to come. And lastly, if you're seeking a certificate of participation, don't hesitate to send me, Tim Grant, an email afterwards to tim@greenteacher.com, and I will do just that. If you're planning on checking out any of our other webinars here this month, hold off and then just send me an email after the last one that you're likely to take in, and let me know that you need a certificate that covers the various webinars you've participated in, and I'll happily send you one single certificate that does all of that. Okay, without further ado, on to you, John. At my introduction, as I mentioned, I'm John and worked with John for many, many years. He's one of the most popular environmental educators on the continent. Whenever I see John at a conference, he's usually surrounded by people. Either he's entertaining them or they're asking him questions. But as a science educator, many years ago, he became really an entomologist. And soon thereafter, the director of the world's oldest bug camp. And since that time, he's led over 100 workshops on different topics. But you can bet that a lot of those had to do with arthropods or insects, entomology in general. And he's really made over 130 presentations at conferences around the world. He routinely, as I mentioned, does workshops on arthropods. He also works on meteorology, elusive plant secrets, rocks and minerals. He's a popular project learning tree facilitator, and he recently received their Outstanding Educator of the Year award. Even the American Horticultural Society recognized his efforts in horticulture education with their Great American Gardener Teacher of the Year award. He consults on nature trail design and has produced a wealth of curriculum materials. And I can't, again, think of someone I'm more delighted to have with us this evening as a presenter. John, thank you so much, and over to you.
Well, great, Tim. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this and have been looking forward to it for a very long time. What we're going to be doing tonight is talking about how to use insects to motivate students and sustain their interest in science. Tim has already mentioned that we run an old bug camp, and it's an intergenerational camp. It's a residential camp. It has become a hardcore academic camp. And as an intergenerational camp, we have youth, families, teachers, environmental educators, and others join us to learn about insects. The teaching model that we've been using is actually pretty exciting because it is very motivational. I get a kick out of listening to some of our old campers talk about what we do when things are not going real well inside. We go outside and we collect. I seem to be having trouble advancing slides. There we go. Most of the activities that we use at Bug Camp are actually used by the classroom teachers who have attended camp. And we supply them, we loan them black lights and things like that when that's necessary. And we do some things that are pretty easy to do. We teach people to do what they exactly want to know how to do. Most people come to camp wanting to know how to collect insects, and we show them how to do it. Almost everything that we do from a hands-on perspective. And we've discovered over the years that students thrive in a real intense learning environment. We got rid of most of our breaks many years ago. We got rid of tennis championships, checkers, and all of those kinds of things, and added entomology activities. One of the interesting things that we do with the intergenerational aspect of camp is we all learn together. Nobody knows everything, and the youth, the adults, even those of us who are on staff make mistakes. We fail. We don't know everything, so we let our inhibitions down. We let them go. And we learn together. We don't treat the students as children. We basically treat them as young adults. We don't gear our activities to the age of 10, which is typically the youngest age we'll admit children. We gear them somewhere toward the 14, 15-year-old age, and the 10-year-olds catch up extremely fast. We don't have to do a lot of things that teachers have to do in the classroom. We don't give them permission to go to the bathroom. They just get up and go when they need to, and they come right back. We have a bottomless fruit bowl for anytime snacks, and they're welcome to get up at any time during sessions and grab some fruit and eat it. Most students do some live collecting at some point in their life. We have some campers that come to camp that only want to live collect, and that's perfectly all right with us. We scrounge around and find enough containers for them to set up to study the insects that they're keeping alive. Most of the children, though, do want to collect. We also have started encouraging them to photograph insects. We offer sessions on insect photography, and you'll see a slide on that a little bit later on. But in fact, we've had some interesting incidences with children who started out not wanting to collect. About the last night, they're asking, do we have time to put a collection together before camp's over? One of the things that we do need to collect insects for is to learn insect classification and morphology. It's almost impossible to learn everything you need to know about insects without a collection. We don't schedule breaks, and we schedule a very tight camp. And any time there's 5 minutes to spare, this is what you see campers doing. They duck back into the lab and they pen. And in that way, we kind of manage the hidden curriculum. There's other things that they might be doing, but basically, when they're not actively involved in some other activity, they're in the lab penning. We use a whole slew of very short things throughout camp to maintain their interest and their attention. We tell a lot of entomological stories. We do demonstrations and lectures throughout camp. Some are very impromptu, and they're just set up in the hall to take advantage of 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there. We share a lot of current information. One of the things that we'll be talking about this summer, for example, are the Africanized bees that have shown up in Mississippi. And I think we've exterminated them, but there'll be something that's there for them to learn from. In that slide, you're actually looking at a graduate student teaching micro-model penning. And the young man in the Health Rocks t-shirt went on to pin moths in the museum this past summer. Another advantage of the intergenerational camp is that the younger students hear the older students using insect orders and family names and describing the insects by order or group, and they start mimicking them and learning insect names. And it's not long before they're almost talking Latin. The basic materials that we use are shown in this. The pink board across the top is insulation board. It's about 2 inches thick. We cut slots in it just using a table saw so that the insect bodies will fit down in there and you can spread the wings level on the board. We use a variety of books. There's a couple kill jars there. There's forceps. There's pens in the picture. And then there's one very important book. It's a 4-H entomology manual. Most states use a variation of this book, and so they're very easy to come by. Some of the teachers that have been to camp have set up permanent learning stations in their classroom. And anytime a child is not doing something else or they finish an in-class assignment, they frequently walk back and they pin insects or do other things at the station that they need to catch up on. And teachers report that they do not seem to miss anything by the time they're in the station. In this particular shot, they're in an insect rearing lab, and shortly they're going to be given insects to take home with them that they can rear. We actually have the first insect rearing lab in the world here in our department. The camp staff is made up of entomologists, horticulturalists, biochemists, plant pathologists, teachers, naturalists, and a lot of others, and all of them enjoy leading hands-on activities and use hands-on activities. Most of our staff will visit schools when they're invited to in our area if they have the time, and most of them do. And that takes care of another thing that teachers are always wondering about. Can someone come to our school and talk to us? This shot shows some of the entomological moments that we use. The top left corner has about 21 or 22 orders of insects in it, and that's a 2-inch by 3-inch Riker mount. And the campers kind of like that. They realize that this is a collection they can put together and give to their biology teacher that will drive the biology teacher nuts. Most biology teachers know the large insects, but not the small ones. And they'll have to get out their ID guides to figure out if that collection works or not. The cicada killer, the cicada there's a great story to go with that. The yellow sulfur moth butterfly. The sulfur butterfly is a migratory butterfly that's easy to see, and very frequently, if they're still flying when camp starts, we do transect counts as we travel from place to place along the highways. Sometimes we have sent campers out at night to find what plant a moth might be based on the length of their proboscis. This is about 8 consecutive month collection of moths, and it gives you a little bit of an idea of what's in your backyard at night. And this is in no way all the moths that are in one of our backyards at night. Living in the southeast, we have quite a number of insects. Some of the skills and the techniques that we teach them how to use aerial and dip nets. We teach them about insect habitats and characteristics. If you miss that dragonfly when it flies across the trail in front of you, just wait a few minutes, and you have another chance at it. We teach them how to handle insects. There's some that are harmful, not as many as you might think. And periodically we do have someone get stung. We teach them how to use insect identification books. We teach them how to curate, pin, preserve, and label insects. And basically, we give them a model to learn, and the process is motivational in itself. The students, once they get started, they continue to grow in this area. We do have campers get stung periodically, and we have campers, surprisingly, that come to camp with EpiPens. And sometimes the parents give them to us and ask the staff if we will take care of it. Sometimes the parents just tell us, my son or daughter has a pen, and if they need to use it, they know what to do. We do watch them very carefully. For most of our camp, we have had an EMT with us. Most of the staff is trained in first aid. We now have a prescription, and we'll be carrying EpiPens for the rest of the time for youth and adults. It takes different EpiPens. And we don't have a whole lot of campers get stung. In fact, if we look back on it, turn out to be more adults and staff than children. Peer teaching and independent experimentation is extremely common, and we encourage it and we allow it. The older students often become role models and instructors. It's common for them to assist the teachers and parents and other students learning to pin and collect. And it's pretty fascinating when you have a 12-year-old showing a teacher how to use their net or how to pin an insect, and that's rather common. There's some interesting things going on here. Brianna's helping another camper tie a string around a fly, and they're going to keep it corralled. And these are not things that we necessarily plan. These are things that spontaneously happen. We do have a library, and it ranges all the way from novice to professional, and campers can stop by and pick up books and take home. We've got a demonstration hive that we operate. The older campers thoroughly enjoy showing the younger where the queen is and how to identify her. We use a variety of guest speakers. Some of the entomologists have traveled rather widely during their careers, and they frequently will come in and tell stories about their travels to New Caledonia and Fiji and other places. What you're looking at here is the director of our entomology museum showing moth cocoons that we have an extremely large collection of, and we have lots of silk, moth silk. And the students are pretty interested in this. Some of the cocoons have some very interesting characteristics. A lot of the cocoons have been used to make various articles by Native Americans. We do a lot of aquatic collecting, and the students are fairly precocious with it. Just to very quickly review the teaching techniques that we've used, we provide comprehensive instruction. We assist students in doing things they've always wanted to do. We have very high expectations. We use experts and peer tutors. We do everything that we can do hands-on. We use their free time to meet our instructional goals. And we use lectures and hands-on laboratory exercises to carry them very deep into their chosen area. We do teach them how to take macro photographs of insects. We also teach them how to use their smartphones and their cameras. We run it now more as a plant and camp opportunity. The students have the opportunity to try out a lot of interesting plants. Here they're eating a wild salad. They taste a variety of honeys, and yeah, we feed them bugs too. I just thought you'd like another shot of that too. And there's the bottomless fruit bowl for anytime snacks. Here we have them engaged in a competition to determine who has learned the most entomology, and we call it the Linnaean Games after a program that is very common with graduate entomology students. And while they're playing, they're actually eating insect snacks. Every once in a while, we do some really fun things. These are representatives of different groups that have been making anatomically correct insects. Team, I have just lost control. Okay, it's back.
Sounds like you're doing, John.
Yeah, it's just come back. We use a variety of things to reinforce instruction, and this is really part of the overall experience. Collecting, pinning, and identifying is actually motivational in itself. For some, showing their collection at state fairs is rewarding. The experienced students are used as instructors at a lot of different events. One of them is Bug Fest, and we have an arboretum in the state, and we take our staff down, our bug campers and students down to service the staff that day, and they do everything. A lot of the students have the opportunity to work for entomology professors during the summer. Most actually become the entomologists in their communities. And teachers, farmers, and parents find their knowledge very useful, and they bring specimens to school. The principals come and get the students to identify them. Another thing that we do is we produce a glowworm newsletter that has a variety of different kinds of stories and things, and if you would like it, we'll add you to the mailing list as well. More free time in the afternoon. The lady in the green shirt is a teacher, and this is another teacher, and both of them are repeat campers. And there we have a student showing a teacher some fine points on painting. It's okay to touch insects and spiders. This is at Bug Fest, and these all involve spiders. And kids can't wait to touch them. See adults that have trouble with it. Here, they're actually looking at nematodes. We study insect and plant diseases as well. And we don't hesitate to take time out if we have a cicada emergence. Here we're watching the wings develop. There's still some bugging around too, and we do some forest entomology. We have had campers that have found trees on their family property that were infested with pine beetles, and the parents are pretty excited about that. We do introduce the campers to using a scanning electron microscope. They collect flowers out in the field and then bring them in and scan them. And those are actually pictures that they were doing. Another shot of campers serving as staff at a bug fest. They actually travel a long distance, about 5 hours to get here, and then they work about a 12-hour day. And then they sneak out and do a little collecting at night for themselves, and then get up and do it again the next day. And the students literally do everything. In fact, in all four of these pictures are students working. More and more, as camp staff, we get to sit back and relax. It is a bug and plant camp nowadays, and here you see a pitcher plant that has been cut open, and you see some of the things inside. There's painting and cooking insects going on in that series. This is the trailer we carry our scanning electron microscope in. And there's three of our students who are operating the scanning electron microscope. These are the kind of images they're producing. There's pitcher plants in the left slide there. The right slide has got a pitcher plant cut open so you can see the wonderful things that plant does to fire ants. It completely decomposes them. That's worth another picture, don't you think? The pitcher plants live in nitrogen-poor soil, and they digest the soft tissue of the insects to get their nitrogen needs. This is what moth scales looks like under a scanning electron microscope. And all of these were made by our students. Here they're doing something pretty fascinating. We do have forensic activity, and there's what's left of a cadaver that's been out for a few days. We usually put a couple animals out that have been put down a couple days apart, and they're tasked with figuring out how long they've been there, and they actually come out right on the money. We've had a lot of campers go on to do some pretty exciting things. I had an email today from one who has just moved to Hawaii. So we're planning on going to Hawaii for a bug camp now since we've got a good camper over there. We night collect. One of the most fun things we do is night collect. We use black lights and mercury vapor lights, and it's kind of fun for the insects to come to you. We don't joke about shooting fish in a barrel. We talk about collecting insects off sheets. And that concludes this part of the presentation. And we'll open it for questions.
Thanks, John. You could just take us to the next slide there. And as encouraged, people have already asked some questions in the chat room. I'll give you a chance to, John, just to sort of take a moment and go back and look at them in the last few comments. But folks, thanks, John, for a great presentation. And folks, if you would take a moment, if you have a question for John, other than the ones already posed in the chat box, do take advantage of the screen in front of you. You can type into the empty box your first question, then hit submit. That'll give you a fresh screen if you have a second question, and I will go back and forth from the back office and relay those questions to John. And so do take a moment to do just that. And by the way, I didn't mention earlier that at the end of our session, I give you an opportunity to I would ask you, in fact, to fill out a small end of session a questionnaire, and those that take the time to do so will be eligible to win a free subscription to Green Teacher. Anyways, John, you can see some questions there, and I guess I have a question that I'll pose first while others are typing. But this is an amazing set of activities that you do at Bug Camp. If someone, let's start with someone who's an interpreter at a nature center, any particular activities you'd recommend, and they want to start some introducing kids to insects? Perhaps that's not been a program they've done in the past. Do you have what activities of those that you've identified in your presentation would be the ones you'd start with, that you'd recommend that they integrate first before taking on other activities?
Really, the first thing that we do is we introduce them to collecting insects. We show them how to use a net. And we take them out immediately and start collecting insects. The ones that want to keep them live, we accommodate them. And the ones that want to go ahead and learn to pin them, we take care of that too. That's usually first. And that is something that almost everybody, all of their life, has wanted to do, and that's to catch an insect, a butterfly or a dragonfly. And it's not difficult to do. It's just a little bit of instruction. I saw another question on here, and it was, does the
actually, John, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. I just had a couple people indicate they're having some technical difficulties. If you, to a quick response to Amber, if you have lost picture and you've lost sound, I think that you're probably better off just to exit and then reboot and come back into WIMBA. And that's probably going to be the best way to get back in. Sorry, John, I interrupted you. Carry on.
Oh, no problem. One of the questions, I think one of the first ones I saw was, does the exoskeleton completely break down in the ants and other insects? And the answer is no, they do not. The soft tissues all dissolve, the pieces all of the exoskeleton all come apart, and the inside is dissolved, and the soft tissue is dissolved by the enzymes. And that's okay, because the pictures are only good for 1 year, and the plant puts up new ones every spring, and the other ones are just discarded. One of the things that we do when we want to show this is we'll collect the dead pictures and open them up, and they have a whole year's worth of insects in them. Let's see, I saw a couple other questions.
John, people were... Sorry, John, a couple other people were asking whether you mentioned I think Amber, who has lost contact with us but may rejoin us in a minute. She asked in the chat box, are any of your game instructions available online? And someone else piped up they'd love to get those too.
The Linnaean games, I assume she's thinking of. The Linnaean games, there's probably a lot of information online. I've never looked for it there. We use it as a buzz bowl, and we have buzzers and all. And the questions, we have an incredibly large book of questions. It was actually produced by graduate students who compete at the Entomological Society of America contest on the Linnaean games. I'm not sure that the directions for the insect costumes are online, but they're pretty self-explanatory. We let them use tape and newspaper, balloons they're around, and things like that to make costumes. They'll use field guides to make them as anatomically correct as they can. And if there was another game I mentioned and curious about it, I'll answer that too. In fact, if you get online, you go back through some of the glowworms, our newsletter, you might find some interesting instructions for various things in there that you would find useful. Accessibility accommodations. Actually, yes, we do. In one of the first pictures on one of the first slides, there was a young lady in a wheelchair, and I actually use an electric chair myself to get around. Some of the places we go, we've got an incredible staff. They'll push a wheelchair almost anywhere. We have a variety of other campers that have had assorted difficulties that we also accommodate. We've had ADD campers, and they're usually not much of a problem for us because the kinds of things that we do suit them just fine. Yes, most of our insects, no, a lot of our insects are not native. They're non-indigenous species that have shown up on our shores. But by far, most of the insects that we collect are native, and we pretty much know what is not. And some of those we encourage our students to take all that they can home, the fire ants for one.
And John, one of the questions that's been submitted is any suggestions for classroom teachers how they could start again on a small scale to do some of these activities?
Absolutely. What I would do first is I would set up a learning station, and I would teach some basic skills. Nets are very easy to make. I would venture a guess that half of the insect nets that we use are homemade. They were made by my wife in the early days when we were too poor to buy them. And we just use sheets to make them with, and we use wire that we could buy at the hardware store, and we use things like broom handles to make the sticks with. And we still use an awful lot of those. Now, they're well made, and we've remade them a few times. The spreading boards, if you know someone that's in construction, they're familiar with the insulation board that we use. You can run it through a table saw a few times and rip it down to the size you need. The kill jars we make out of pint, half-pint jars. We put some wood chips on the bottom of one set of the jars and pour a little plaster of Paris on top of that. Let it set up, and then we put ethyl acetate in those jars. And that's non-acetone fingernail polish remover. We put alcohol in the other, and the isopropyl that you get at the big box store works fine. And there's different insects that go in different jars. Of course, you don't want to put the butterflies and the moths in the alcohol.
John, another question. I'm not sure if you mentioned it earlier, but the obvious question when you're collecting insects is, and you're dealing with young people, is that how do you I'm sure you addressed this at the outset, but how do you for camp leaders, for park interpreters, for classroom teachers who are just getting started, how do you introduce the topic of the fact that you're going to be killing insects as part of these activities?
I think most people come to camp anticipating that we're going to be killing insects. Periodically, we have had parents come in before children and ask, does my child have to kill insects? And the answer is, no, they don't have to. And what we do is we accommodate the children that want to live collect. Now, when they live collect, they need to take care of them. That means providing them with moisture and other things that they might need. We also watch to make sure that the insects that they live collect are not dying in the containers. And that does sometimes become a problem, but we don't spend a whole lot of time addressing that. We don't have a whole lot of questions about it. Now, we're asked the reason why we have to kill them periodically, and basically, if you want to study the morphology, if you really want to be able to identify it.
John, I'm just going to interrupt you there. John, your volume is a little low. Maybe you could either speak closer to your mic or just speak up a little bit. You're kind of dipping low on the volume.
Okay. Pull the mic in a little bit closer. Is this better? Okay. To really study an insect, you really have to put some of them down. In fact, an awful lot of insects, if you want to know specifically what it is, you need to sit at a microscope for a while, and you need to use some of the professional books in our collection to identify it. And if it's crawling around the slide, you're going to have a lot of difficulty. Also, there's a lot of things on the insects that are not so obvious if you're just going to hold it for a minute and let it go. A lot of insects have mites, and they have other things that are particularly interesting. Pseudoscorpions are sometimes hanging on the moths, and when you have the opportunity to look at it real close, you can spot these. It gives you a little bit better picture of what the environment really is like out there. Let's see, I see euthanized insects.
Sorry, John, on that same point about microscopes, someone asked the question, a scanning microscope, of course, is fairly expensive. Is there another way that is there another alternative if people don't have access to that for scanning insects?
Oh, absolutely. There are digital microscopes that are absolutely fantastic. Some of our best images with the digital microscopes are only at 60 power. And with the capability to go up to 10,000, we very seldom have campers that want to look at something that with that much magnification. So, but there's plenty of alternatives.
Great. And by the way, we've had several people ask about the games and activities. And I think I'm not sure that you made the point, I think you did, that many of them are involved in that 4-H manual. Is that the case?
I'm not sure, not so much those. There's more instructions in there that would relate to collecting and learning your orders and things like that. But are there specific games that you're interested in? Because if there are, I can send you directions.
Sure. Maybe people, if feel free to answer that question in the chat box itself. We've had lots of great suggestions. Courtney, who says that he or she makes bug catchers with pillowcases. What a great idea!
Pillowcases work real good. The quantity of insects that we collect makes the funnel shape a little bit more desirable than the box end of the pillowcase. But for starting out, pillowcases work very good. Modification that we've made to most of our nets over the years is we've put some clear mesh material at the bottom of the net so that you can see what you have in there a little bit better. And when you catch a wasp, you kind of want to see it. And if you can see it, then you don't run the danger of getting stung. Most insects will go up when you collect them, and if you hold the bottom of the net so that it is high, the insects will work their way up to the top, and that allows you to slip your container that you're going to put it in up under the net, and then you can watch while you get it in the container, whether you're going to keep it live or not. I like the idea of encouraging only a 24-hour live collection. That's a great idea. We do release an awful lot of insects that we collect, and so do the students. If they collect something that they already have, they're pretty quick to let it go. They may ask if someone around them needs it, and if they don't, they let them go.
John, I'll let you respond to the couple of questions that are in the chat box. I'm going to go to the back office and see if there's some new questions.
Okay, fine. We've got Madagascar hissing cockroaches also. We use them for a hissing cockroach race. We used to do field games in the afternoons, but we've dropped that because we have so many more things that are more important. But we would have campers collect the insect that they thought could crawl the fastest or jump the highest, and we would give them. At one time, we gave them candy to make insects out of. They would try to make insects that looked as anatomically correct as possible. When we started changing our food and getting more involved in fruit, we let that go. I know there's other things you can make insects out of, and we've used tissue paper and pipe cleaners and some other things. Camps are part of 5 days long. We usually start on Sunday afternoon. We check into the dorms that morning. We start on Sunday afternoon, and we finish by noon on Thursday. It sounds like it's pretty quick, but boy, it is intense. We euthanize the insects, but with ethyl acetate or alcohol. Both of them work extremely fast.
Great. And I wondered, I was, by the way, I was checking the back office when you were answering the question about explaining that parents often ask if their kids have to kill insects, and we've heard I think Dawn, who said they do a release of live insects within 24 hours. But isn't there another explanation? Wouldn't you also argue, I would think, not argue, but explain to students, not the ones that, obviously there's going to be some that don't want to do any killing, that's fine, I think you answered that. But wouldn't you say to most students at the outset that yes, you're going to be taking the lives of those individual insects, but you're not doing so with any endangered or rare ones, that insect populations are, wouldn't you sort of explain that insect populations are very, in general, quite large, and that the impact of the killing of a relatively small number for the bug camp purposes is going to be insignificant in affected populations? Is that a kind of argument that would be valid to make?
It is. It's extremely valid. We know the endangered species in our area, and we watch pretty careful. And we actually avoid the one habitat that we know that one might very likely be in. It's also surprising how few children worry about killing insects. And we seem to get more concerned with parents. On the other hand, most parents think absolutely nothing of stepping on ants and swatting mosquitoes. Only what we're doing with them is we're studying them.
Absolutely, big difference. And and I think there's a way to do all of that with respect, and to develop, to engender that sense of respect and awe. And in spite of the fact that you're going to be killing a certain number for those study purposes. Some of us, one of the people asked the question, John, where's everyone from at the outset? One of the people, I think it was Don from Wisconsin, said, well, I've just come in from shoveling 4 inches of snow, and as I mentioned, here in Toronto, Ontario, we're in a blazing, probably our biggest snowstorm of the winter. We haven't had much snow, but that leads me to the question that for those of us who live in the northern parts of the U.S. or Canada, winter is a big part of the school year. And any thoughts about winter insects?
Absolutely, I do. Matter of fact, there was an entomologist who wrote an article in the ESA journal back in the spring of last year, I believe it was. He decided that since there's a Christmas bug count, there ought to a bird count. He ought to do a Christmas bug count, and so he got friends into helping him. And I want to say they found 175 insects during the Christmas holiday. So there are insects that are out up there. In fact, there'll even be some pretty unique things that we don't see down here, such as the snow fleas or the springtails that get out on top of the snow. So there are still places. You may have to get under the snow, and you may have to look a little harder. Now, during the wintertime, it's a good time to dust off your equipment, make sure everything's in good repair, repair your nets. Good time to catch up on your identification of insects. So there's still activity to do, even in the far north.
Great, excellent, good. That's terrific. Let me just see if there's. I think we've got a couple more questions from the chat box, and I will go to the back office now and see if there's more.
To find endangered species in your area, get up with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Refuge, or the Ecological Service office nearest you, and they'll be familiar with what's endangered in your area. We actually have...
Go ahead, John.
We actually had, for the last 5 or 6 years, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service biologist that was responsible for endangered species in our state has literally been camping with us.
And for elementary teachers who might be getting started, what recommendations would you have for them about what insects might they focus on?
There's some easy ones. I would focus on whatever they see around the yard first. Ants are great. The further north you are, the safer they are too. But ants are very easy to focus on. You can actually do surveys of how many ants are inside of a hula hoop that you throw on the yard, or inside a square foot piece of coat hanger wire that you toss out. You can look at population counts. If termites are easy to work with. They're easy to find. If you find a rotten log, you can kick a little bit of it apart, take some termites out. There's some pheromones that you can get access to. A lot of the ink pens have got a pheromone in them, and if you draw a circle on a piece of paper, and you put the termites in the center of that paper, they'll crawl out until they get to that ink, and then they'll go around in a circle. It turns out termites are blind. Yeah, the ink has got a trail pheromone in it, or a pheromone or a chemical that the termites perceive as a trail pheromone laid down by another termite. And both of those are easy. Crickets, grasshoppers, they'll find granddaddy longlegs. They're not insects, not even spiders, but they can play with those. There's walking sticks. Most of these are very abundant, and none of them represent any real threats.
And John, would you, for that same elementary teacher, are there sort of identifiers or identification sources or guides that you'd recommend for someone who's getting started to identify basic insects?
Yes, there is. The golden guides are absolutely fantastic for younger children, and they're easy to use. They have a lot of variety in them. They make one for insects. They make one for butterflies and moths. And that is definitely where I would start. Other thing that I would recommend that all teachers do as they begin to get started is get a copy of your state's 4-H entomology manual. You can call your 4-H office in your county if you have one in your county and ask them if they'll check and see if there is one available. I think there is a scaled-down version of the 4-H entomology manual on the Crosby Arboretum website. And that's an arboretum here in Mississippi that features native plants. But that has got a lot of basic information. There's information there about the different orders and how to identify insects by order. And that's a great place for all teachers to start.
Great. And John, just to get you to talk up a little bit louder there again, you can see Charlotte's asking the question about insects spreading disease. Are there concerns with such insects other than obviously mosquitoes, ticks, and roaches?
No, not really. Not really. We are concerned with mosquitoes, and we don't hesitate to use 100% DEET. There have been, in 25 or 30 years of using DEET, there has never been an instance where someone was harmed when they were using it correctly. I don't know of any instance of where people were using it not correctly and have been harmed. There's a lot of natural insecticides or insect repellents available, and periodically we have people that really want to use those, and sometimes we turn that into an experiment, and we count the mosquito bites that someone using those get versus someone who's using DEET. A better experiment, since there are differences in skin and things that some skins literally attract insects, some sounds attract insects, some voices actually attract mosquitoes. But if you put DEET on one arm and another alternative on another arm, then you can make a little bit better comparison. But no real insect diseases that you need to worry about other than the obvious.
Great, thanks, Don. And by the way, folks, if you have other questions, you can, of course, still type them into the in the on-screen box and hit submit and propel them to the back. But lots of you are also using the chat box, which is great. And I don't have any more questions to pose to John. So if you have any others, please take a moment and type them either into the box on the screen or to the into the chat box, and we will. I'm also interested. The other question I will ask the audience actually is, we quite asked it at the beginning as we'd intended to, but some of you have already mentioned your own involvement in teaching young people about insects. But I'd be, and I think John would too, be very interested in hearing from those of you who also work with insects, and tell us a little bit about your experience or what particular activities you're most proud of, what challenges you faced. Please take a moment and add those to the chat box, or even type them into the question box at the top. Either way, we'd love to hear from you.
There are
John,
a
I've
lot
got
of
a
ways
question.
to... Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Carry on.
There are a number of ways to attract insects. I see someone was talking about putting out food, and in your fruit that's not eaten, it works good. We use pitfall traps. We use beer and bananas mashed up together, sometimes with some brown sugar and sometimes with other things, and painted on trees to attract insects at night. We use pitfall traps where we bury cups in the ground, and we'll put a little soapy water or alcohol in the cup. And sometimes we'll put a board over that so that the insects that are crawling along the ground will hit the board and they'll run down the board until they drop in the cup. But there's a variety of ways that we attract insects.
Thank you, John. That's
spider guides. First thing that comes to mind is the golden books. Again, the golden guides. There's one for spiders that's actually very, very respectable. The other books that are useful for spiders are books that are quite expensive and a little bit more difficult to use. But you're right. We need a very good spider guide for youth and for teachers to use. The best thing that I can recommend is learn the spiders in your area that are dangerous. And once you know those, the others are kind of fun to play with. It's always great to find a wolf spider carrying her babies on her back because they're fun to play with. You can tap her and dislodge the babies, and she'll freeze. The babies will be just scattered around everywhere. And then when she is sure that you're not going to, you don't represent a threat, she'll stand up very high on her legs, and the babies will climb back on, and she'll go about her business. Tarantulas are an easy, gentle way to get people involved with spiders. As long as you're calm, spiders, the tarantulas will be also.
fantastic, John. And by the way, you made another reference to those golden guides, and I think that's probably a good segue for me to make a comment I should have made earlier, which is that we will send out an email to all the more than 100 people who signed up for the session, many of whom are anxiously going to, sometime over the next week, are going to look at the archived version. But it would be, if there are guides like the Golden Guides, if you have any sort of bibliographic information for them or any other information sources that you'd like to point people to, please send those to me by early in the morning or later tonight, and I will make sure that we include those in that email that we send out to people announcing that the archived version of this session is available.
The Peterson guides are very good. There's a Kaufman series of insect guides that have become very popular over the last few years. Both of those are great. Black soldier flies eating lunch during the waste. That's a pretty interesting insect. Those things live on some things that are absolutely dangerous. Not talking about lunchroom meals, but they live on waste, and they live in environments that would certainly give us diseases. And they can live in that, and that makes them a pretty interesting creature. They have got the capability to deal with a lot of toxic things in the environment. And that's a fly that needs a lot more study. And you're making biofuel out of them.
That's pretty interesting. And just before that, John, Kristen asked in the chat room, or made the comment that she says demonstrations with cockroaches and millipedes. But the question she asked is, do you have fun ways to explain or show decomposition?
Decomposition. I think probably our best way is we put down animals for the necropsy. Are you thinking what kind of composition are you thinking about? Are you thinking about let's see, cockroaches and millipedes? We used Burlese funnels. We put funnels with lights over them and put leaf litter in the funnels, and we use the lights to dry the soil out and the leaves out, driving insects to the bottom of the funnels where they drop out, and that lets us see those, see the animals that are in there. We've made, in 2-liter bottles, we've actually set up vermicompost in there so that you can watch it in process with other things. We put leaf litter in there to watch it. Millipedes are pretty fascinating to play with. We see a lot of them, and we'll pick them up, and we prefer to do it ourselves, but that doesn't last long. But we'll shake them a little bit in our hands to cause them to give off their little chemical discharge, and we'll let the campers the students smell what they've done. It's got kind of an almond smell. And in fact, we've actually put millipedes in jars with insects, and pretty soon the insects will be dead because of the millipedes' defensive chemicals. I'd like to know more about Mindy's use of the black soldier fly. We'll have to talk later.
And John, are there sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Are there websites? Yep. Are there websites, John, that also are good for education?
There are a slew of websites, and there are websites that are very. I can't think of one or two of them off the top of my head. There's a bug guide website that a lot of our students use as they're trying to identify insects. They can photograph them and send them to them, and they respond very quick. Most universities that have entomology departments have got somebody that takes care of outreach, and that's another resource in your state. Find out who your extension entomologists are and talk to them.
Great. Well, this is John. This has been a fabulous presentation, and we're still getting comments in the chat box about how people do similar activities or some of the ones that you've mentioned and their variations. And I know that we're going to see a lot of people viewing the archive of this session as well. I'm going to, I think what I'm going to do, and we can still chat a little bit, and people can still put comments in the chat box. But I think what I'm going to do now is put up the questionnaire at the end and ask people to take a moment and fill in the question that you can now see on the screen. There's really, the 3 of them are multiple choice questions. There's only 2 that ask you to elaborate at all. But if you would fulfill that, fill in the questionnaire, I should say, we'd be very grateful. And again, all those that do their names will be entered to win a free 1-year subscription to Green Teacher. So, but meanwhile, if you have other comments, John, while people are filling that in, by all means, don't hesitate.
Oh, Dawn, there's something that might happen this year with PLT that might be kind of interesting. I have suggested that I have proposed to do a session at their conference this spring where I will give them an entomology activity to go with every activity in the K through 8 guide. In fact, there's something that since you're a PLTer, Google up my last name and the word marginalia, and it'll take you to the Project Learning Trees website, and there is a booklet of other activities there. I go through that window they talk about all the time, and there's a whole book of things that I see outside of that window.
Excellent. Well, again, John, thank you for a very rich presentation. I think it's probably time for us to click. I'll get you to turn off the archive. Turn off the archive, I should say. And people, if they still have questions, we'll answer them. But I think we've this has been a really rich session. I know I've learned a lot more than I do